Ben, I guess the first thing is everybody around here wants to know, how are you and what are you doing?
I'm doing great. I've hopped into the businesses full time. I was kind of in that. I was in that role. This is my second retirement, right? I retired in November of 2017 with contingencies on it. Obviously, my contingencies were met. November of 2018, I came back. I made my run, did what I could do, and then this one is probably a more final retirement. You know, part of me wanted to do it, but then part of me was also forced to do it. You know, needing a hip replacement. Resurfacing, not replacement, kind of really pushed me further in that direction.
And the other thing I was going to ask Ben, since we're there, is every athlete likes to end on their terms.
Yes.
So, like you said, you're probably done. Maybe there's that scintilla.
No.
What would you say?
Yeah, okay. I just, you know, when you say like crazy things like never to anything, right? There's never a never, right? I mean, if all of a sudden someone said, well, $10 million, okay, sure, whatever, I'll do it, right? You know, I mean, so you never say never. I think it's highly unlikely. I'm very happy with where I'm at. Obviously, I'm getting the hip surgery done. That's a full year. You know, the one thing I was happy about, I can do a resurfacing, not a replacement, which means I'm not going to have any restrictions when I do come back. And, you know, for me, that probably just means I'm going to wrestle with the kids I coach at the academy. That's probably all that means for me. So I never want to say never because I think that's too gross a statement. Obviously, we know in sports, you know, it's funny, I always grew up reading a whole lot of biographies about people, and I always thought, like, why are these guys coming back? And you think of, like the one person comes to mind, like Barry Sanders, retired early, never came back. Besides that, you can't name a lot of other people that did that. And it's like, now I'm 35, and I always wanted to be retired way before 35. I never saw myself competing this long. But it's like, it doesn't matter how old you are, there's still something inside you as a competitor that loves to compete. It's just fun. It's like, and my wife finally asked me, she's like, you know what, Ben, I've never asked you, like, what does that walk to the cage feel like? What does it feel like when the announcer's saying your name? It's like, Amy, if I got to have that feeling every day, I would do it every day. It's like a drug. It's like a drug. You do all this work.
People don't do that when you go do the dishes or when you're playing, you know, ultimate frisbee or something like that. They don't.
Sure. And so I got to assume it's, you know, running out Lambeau Field and 70,000 people are cheering, or you throw a touchdown. It's like, dude, you don't get those feelings in regular everyday life. And so I think there's always a party that says, wow, no matter what it is, no matter how old you are, how far out you are, there's something that always says, I miss that. And then the second part that is, there's some part of you who in your brain there's still a 25-year-old you that says, I can do that. I can still do that. And, you know, now you're 35, now you're 38, now you're 40. And the smart part of your brain says, I can't do that. I'm not that guy anymore.
It's like the old country song, I'm not as good as I once was, but I'm as good once as I ever was. Is that
yes, no, thinking? I mean, you know, when you say that line, it makes me think of Brett Favre.
Yeah.
You know, he's a great competitor, not a great football player, but a great competitor who just loved to compete. And, you know, one of the things that made Brett Favre so lovable was his competitive spirit was so outgoing.
Yes.
Like, you didn't have to ask him, you could see it, you could feel it. And that's what people, it was contagious, but that's what people loved about him. And so, yeah, I mean, and that's exactly it, Lance, is like, I could have some performances like I did. I can have some practices like I had when I was 25. But, you know, when I was 25 or 21 or 22, I could do them every single day. I could wake up, go, wake up, go, wake up, go. And now I do one of those, I'm like, oh, man, I'm sore. That's it for the week. I got to go late the rest of the week.
Now you're making me feel my friend, because we go way back.
Yep.
So the next question is, did you, in your mind, for the most part, accomplish what you wanted to? State champion, unbelievable career in Missouri, you know, Olympics, multi-organizational MMA champion. You got to the UFC. Did you do everything you wanted to?
Well, I would say, you know, what age a kid am I, right? Because I would say I went far past most kids' furthest dreams, is what I would say. You know, I came up short in the two pinnacles, right? When I got my opportunity in the UFC, which wasn't when I wanted it, but that's when I got it. And then obviously the Olympics in 2008, I came up a little bit short. But I think what you realize as an adult about those situations, like, it is, you know, the people say this all the time, but it's true. The difference between winning and losing is inches, right? It's inches. And so, listen, you do everything you can. The Olympics, you get one shot every 4 years. It's not like I can go say, hey, I messed up, let me go again next week. You know, it's like, so you're going to win sometimes and lose sometimes. And man, I reached such high levels in both sports that this point, I feel as though I have no regrets.
And you put it well, Ben, because I always felt bad for a while for Dan Jansen because it was like he dominated his sport, and yet everybody kind of half looked at him like a failure because on the biggest.
Yeah.
But then he finally got his gold. So
yeah, but that's one thing where athletes have an issue with society. It's like, listen, society loves winners.
Right.
And so when they love you because you win, that's great.
Yep.
But when you lose by a little bit, and you're not any different than any other time, right? Whether Dan Jansen's a winner or loses by that he's the same guy.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
But society views you differently. And as an athlete, you just got to let that go.
So in other words, when you got knocked out,
Yeah.
how do you view that? What do you think
Yeah.
about that?
It was like, I mean, that it's funny because that's such a turning point in my life. I mean, I literally made the statement too, is if I win this fight, I'm going to be the biggest star in the UFC. And I don't feel listen, I made effing George Masvidal the biggest star in the UFC. I mean, he's top 2, top 3 right now because of that moment in that fight. And so it's like, but again, inches. If my head's 2 inches this way or 2 inches that, I don't get knocked out. I go on to win the fight. Who knows, right? And so what you have to realize as an athlete is, there's some things that are beyond your control. You can control a whole bunch of things, but there's some things that are beyond your control, especially in a sport like MMA where it's one little break, right? There's the guy last weekend, he was winning for 24 minutes and 55 seconds, and he gets knocked out at 24:56. It's like, are those two different people? No, that's the same person. And so you kind of come to this conclusion that if you value yourself based on what other people say about you, life's tough, and so you kind of just got to let all that go.
So in other words, Ben, in your mind, whether you get knocked out in the first 5 seconds of the fight, you get knocked out in the 5th round or 3rd round or whatever it is, it's the same thing. You take an L. Is that kind of the way you look at it?
I mean, I think really no matter what I've actually been coming up with this phrase, and I think it's really important. And especially, I've become a big proponent of people pushing too much in youth athletics. And when kids tie their identity to the outcome, bad things happen. We never want to tie our identity to the outcome. And I would like you to tie your identity to your effort. Do you give me great effort? If you give me great, that's all as a parent, as a coach, that's all I can ask. And then looking if I can morph out of myself, all I can ask out of myself is great effort, that I do everything I can to succeed. Hey, if the outcome doesn't go my way, sometimes you can't control that.
So your legacy, when people remember Ben Askren, you would rather have them remember the effort and the all-out that you gave rather than, like you said, getting knocked out in 5 seconds or this or that or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, right? But you never can never control what people are going to remember. People remember what they remember. That's fine. But if you say, NCAA titles, Hodge trophies, Olympian, MMA champion, right? If you remember all those things, like, for me, all I knew I could give was my best effort. And that's what I think I gave. And I think when competitors, when they look at themselves in the mirror, if they can say that I gave a great effort, they generally don't have any regrets. And I say this a lot of times, kids, because kids get caught up, in the high school in the moment doing whatever the cool kids are doing, And I always tell them, hey, listen, you've got a finite time where you're going to compete. If you're lucky like me, I get to do it till I was 35. I was extremely blessed. At the end of the day, if you can look yourself in the mirror and you feel like you gave your best effort, you're going to feel great about it, whether it's 18 or whether it's 35. If at age 18, you look in the mirror and you say, damn, I wish I could have done more. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. That's a life you're going to live with regrets.
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody can outwork you. That's the phrase that I always say, Ben. And the other thing is, I know you're passionate about amateur wrestling, helping out University of Wisconsin, expanding, the Askren camp, and so to speak. Maybe talk a little bit about why you're so passionate about it and why you wanted to see it grow in the Milwaukee area.
Wrestling. I want to see wrestling grow everywhere. I'm a big proponent of wrestling. I think sport in general teaches a lot of great values to kids. I think wrestling, I'm biased, it's fair, right? I think even more so because of the fact that it's one-on-one and your effort can really control how good you get at something. So wrestling specifically, but every kid, that feeling when you walk out on the mat and you're all by yourself and you got to go put your hands on another person and get it done. I think that's just such an empowering feeling for kids to have. And so Max and I were opening academies 4 and 5. And the other thing we say, people always ask me, how big are you going to grow? Well, I can't tell you the answer to that. Here's what I can tell you. The difference a great coach can have on a kid's life versus a terrible coach is immense. And so if I can keep putting great people in front of kids, I'm going to do it over and over and over again because I know what we're doing. I might not be personally doing it, but what we are doing, we're changing lives. That coach, Jordan Newman, 2-time NCAA champion, UW Whitewater, who is opening our academy in Franklin. He was an AWA student back in the day. I can tell you, and he would say this 100 times 100, his life was changed by wrestling. His life was made better. He became a different person because of wrestling. Now, if he can take those messages and pass them on to the next generation, whether you change one kid's life or whether you change hundreds of kids' lives, that makes a difference.
I was also going to ask in the sense that, like obviously wrestling opened doors for you in the MMA world. And earlier we had he's now known as Otis in the WWE, but he was Nicola.
Oh, yeah, they're in town. He's tag team partner. I coached his tag team partner.
Yes. Really? With Tucker?
His real name is Levi Cooper. I coached him at Arizona State, yes.
There you go. So if you go the WWE route or Kurt Angle or whatever.
He was supposed to call me. What a punk.
Came to town.
I'm going to text him right now. What a punk.
They were in town. They were here at 10 o'clock. Sean did the interview.
Oh, my goodness.
But what's funny about that, Ben, is just, do you like the fact that for a while people thought, oh, okay, amateur wrestling, that's all there is. It seems like more doors are open now for that. Do you like that?
Amateur wrestling is kind of reaching new pinnacles all the time. I mean, from any metric you want, whether it's people doing it, tournaments, viewers, right? The NCAA is now viewing every single match of the NCAA tournament you can watch because so many people are watching it that they're expanding the coverage. Like companies like Flow Wrestling are expanding the coverage. You can watch any Big Ten duel of the year, you can watch it, right? And so Big Ten Network on Flow Wrestling on the app on the phone, So people like me, and I always say it's funny because one of the old taglines of Flow Sports was most sports companies are a mile wide and an inch deep. We're a mile deep and an inch wide. And so people like me who are passionate about wrestling, or if you're passionate about cross country or swimming or whatever, you can now in 2019 we can consume those things. I can grab my phone, I can click on a Friday night and go watch a college wrestling match. That wasn't an option 15 years ago, and so those things are allowing the sport to grow. The Olympic trials is already sold out. The NCAA Wrestling Championship is in a football stadium this year because there's so much demand. Cool. Yeah, it's really cool.
I have a kid that swims, so it's the same thing. It's like at first it's like you can't even hardly find it, and now it's
everywhere.
Accessible.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is to grow it even more. I loved your style because you were the funky guy or whatever. Would you like to see amateur wrestling, if possible, have more wrestlers like you to make it more exciting for the general public?
I think the literal action in the match obviously helps. What I'm more proponent of is kind of what WWE does. They have a predetermined outcome. There's millions of people that watch it, right? It's what MMA does. It's build personalities, and that's with things like Flow Sports. We are getting to feel for personality. Someone like Seth Gross at Wisconsin, people know what that feels like. Spencer Lee at Iowa, and so they build these. That's not a real relationship, but it's just like a Wisconsin's fans' relationship with Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers. Yep. They have a relationship from watching them every Sunday.
They cheer for them or boo them.
They cheer for them or boo them, and so with wrestling growing and becoming more accessible, we're being able to build personalities. Personalities are what draws.
I think I also asked you, obviously we have the Tokyo 2020 games coming up, whatever. Are you excited that wrestling gets another shot or whatever you want to say on the Olympic stage?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think wrestling is growing to a new level. Even, it's called United World Wrestling, the global governing body for the sport. They're slow, but they're making changes. They're becoming better. It's slow, but they are. Yeah, I mean, so obviously the Olympics is the pinnacle of amateur wrestling, and American wrestling specifically. This, so we call it a quad, right? 17, 18, 19, 20. This quad is probably the most successful quad we've ever had. Yeah.
That's good. So people should watch and people should care and whatever and get behind it.
I feel like the United States will have a medal contender at every single weight class in men's freestyle, and then in women's freestyle, I believe we'll have 3 returning world champions on the team. So
that's
possibly four.
So when I was really young, I mean, the Petersons are from my area, by Rice Lake or whatever, and I can't remember and like way, you got to go way back. 72
and 76, obviously 84 because there was a Soviet boycott. 96 was a decent year, but really, I don't get deep into wrestling, but when the Soviet Union broke up, it created 10 really good countries instead of one great country, and so that increased the depth. So really, there was really a real dry period from, say, 97, 98 for about a decade and a half where U.S. was struggling. They started turning it around, but we've turned around even more. We're having, the last 4 years, tons of success.
Good.
Yeah.
Other things you're going to do in your so-called sports afterlife, in addition to the AWA, maybe just speak a little bit about cryptocurrency and also speak about just kind of your other interests, like we've talked,
Sure.
Is it ultimate frisbee or what?
Disc golf.
Disc golf.
I have a disc golf course in my house.
Because I know there's one or the other, but disc golf and what you're
Yeah. Well, my Twitter following actually gets annoyed because I have such a diverse array of interests. But
Right.
listen, I'm a normal person. Like I'm not just because I was an MMA athlete or a wrestler, that doesn't mean I just get to like one thing.
Right.
I like a lot of things. I'm very interested in cryptocurrency. I love it. Bitcoin, Litecoin. I'm sponsored by a fantastic company called eToro. I genuinely, now I'm not an expert, I'm not whatever. I genuinely think cryptocurrency is the future, right? I'm also interested in disc golf. I built a disc golf course in my house. I love disc golf.
Yes.
I'm an amateur podcaster. Well, I guess I get paid, so I'm not an amateur. I'm a professional podcaster. I do an MMA podcast. I do a crypto podcast, and I do a wrestling podcast. So the podcasting thing is fun because, again, it's just like, hey, I get to hop on with a friend, talk about something I'm really interested in, whether it's crypto, whether it's MMA, whether it's wrestling, and I get paid to do it. It's like people try to crap on me because I lost my last 2 fights and whatever. I get it sucks, but man, I feel as though I'm kind of living my dream life. Like I get to do everything I want to do. I get to go coach kids, run the AWA. I get to do my podcast, talk about the things that I love, whether it's disc golf or crypto or MMA or wrestling, right? And I have a really, I feel like I've gotten really lucky.
And I've always said that you have a future in some type of media. 'Cause you got the gift of gab, my friend. I mean, you can bring it. So,
I appreciate it.
Have you ever thought about that in some way, shape, or form?
ESPN just pitched me to come out tomorrow. I said no, but tomorrow to do like a test run for something. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm busy. So I guess they're meeting next week to talk about me. So we'll see.
So as of right now, you're kind of giving them the stiff arm. You're giving them
Well, they only gave me 2-day notice. In all fairness, 2-day notice is tough.
Okay. And is that for MMA analysis?
MMA and possibly like the NCAA Championships wrestling. I have mixed feelings. I don't know if I'll love it or not. And I love everything else I do. So it's like I feel as if I do that, I would have to give something else up. Yeah. So here I told them I would give it a chance, and we'll see what it feels like.
Don't you need an outlet though for your trash talk? You're like world class.
Twitter. It's Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. I talk trash to everyone. It's fun. You can talk to us about politics, journalists, fighters, wrestlers, anybody. Yeah, it's Russia, they got kicked out of the Olympics. They cheated so much. They got kicked. Think about how much you have to cheat to get kicked out of the Olympics. They did it. They got kicked out. It's amazing.
And I imagine, like you said, losing your last 2 fights, I imagine you get a lot of heat on Twitter.
Oh, yeah. You just got to ignore the mentions. Listen, you know what? If I get a question outside of wrestling or fighting questions from people, it's like, how do you deal with all the hate on social media? That's how I genuinely, because a lot of people on a smaller scale, they get it, and it's like, I genuinely don't think about it. And Lance, you knew me from when I was in high school. I was taking heat back then.
Absolutely.
It's like I just let it run off, and I know again, you can't have your identity tied to what other people think of you. You got to be your own person. So it's like, especially high school kids. I know there's like this epidemic of depression due to social media stuff, and it's because people weigh what other people say too much, and people, when we're not face to face, man, if I'm looking in your eyes, it's really, we are not even close, but it's going to be really hard for me to say something mean to you.
Yes.
When I'm staring at a screen, it's really easy to say something mean.
I'm going to ask you a question about losing your last fight and getting knocked out. And okay, I'm here.
We're here.
You're one of the baddest men on the planet. I better back it up, or at least ask you a fair question.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And, and like you said, I've known you almost half your life when you had like hair that was twice as good, twice as out there. And you were, I mean, in high school, I've never seen anybody in high school that talked it and walked it and backed it up, but you brought it as like a junior or senior in high school the first time I met you.
And so you have to let it all run off. And that's, where a lot of people struggle with social media is they internalize a lot of those comments.
They look at the likes.
Yeah.
And they live on
and they look at the mentions and they oh my, this person said something. Yeah, you got to let that roll off you.
20 people can like something and one says something negative, and unfortunately kids. And that's probably another life lesson that you do in your academies too.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully it seems to all of the kids are fairly nice to each other there, so it's not an issue, but just everyday people. Hey, how do you deal with all that hate? I can't deal with it. I get that quite a bit.